The drive back to Natchez was longer than I remembered, or maybe it just felt that way because I was heading straight into a house I no longer recognized as home. When I pulled into the driveway, the place looked exactly the same. White shutters, symmetrical flower beds, porch swing barely swaying in the late afternoon heat. But the silence that met me at the door told a different story. Mom opened it before I even knocked. She smiled, tight-lipped, eyes scanning me like a checklist. "Your room's upstairs. Your dress fitting is tomorrow." No hug, no warmth, just logistics. I nodded, walked past her, and climbed the stairs with a suitcase in one hand and a sinking feeling in my chest. Somewhere between Atlanta and here, I'd lost more than time. I'd left pieces of myself behind, scattered across rest stops and gas stations, unsure if I'd ever pick them up again. The house felt like a museum, polished, cold, full of things that didn't belong to me anymore. Or maybe never did. The next morning, I followed Charlene and Mom to the boutique. It was a small, overly perfumed space that reeked of lavender and expectations. The stylist welcomed us by name, not mine, Mom's. When they unveiled the dress, I went quiet. It wasn't the one I picked. The satin was gone, replaced with stiff lace that itched when I touched it. The neckline had been raised, the waist cinched tighter. It looked like something from a magazine spread titled Classic Southern Elegance. Not me. Charlene clapped softly. "Mom thought this would flatter you better." I nodded once, smiled like I agreed, stepped behind the curtain and let them zip me into someone else's fantasy. The seamstress leaned in, whispered, "Your mother was quite insistent." I laughed under my breath. That's her signature. Each pinprick felt less like tailoring and more like control. I kept the peace and lost myself one stitch at a time. That night at dinner, I tried to feel normal. I mentioned casually I'd written my thank you speech for the reception. Odella didn't even look up from her wine. "Charlene already took care of that," she said. I blinked. "She what?" Charlene pulled out her phone, reading aloud a polished, poetic tribute to our beloved guests and family who carried Ellison through every storm. None of those words were mine. None of that sentiment was real. My mind flashed back to college graduation. I was supposed to give the student address. Odella had claimed a scheduling mix-up forced them to cut the speech for time. It wasn't until months later that I found out the donor's son had been given my slot instead. This wedding wasn't a celebration, it was a script, and I was just the bride who was supposed to smile through her scenes. Later, lying in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, I scrolled through old texts from my dad. He died 5 years ago, but his words never did. "Respect starts with how you let others speak over you," he once told me. I sat up, opened my notebook, and wrote my own speech. No flourishes, no performance. For those who helped me grow, even when no one else noticed. That was it. I didn't know if I'd read it aloud, but I needed to know it existed. Somewhere in the middle of my third revision, I realized this whole chapter of my life was about being spoken over, written over. I was the blank space everyone else filled in. What happens when someone refuses to read their lines? The next day, I stopped back at the boutique alone to pick up the altered dress. While I waited, a young assistant, barely 17, approached with cautious eyes. "That dress looked uncomfortable on you," she said. I smiled gently. It was. She looked relieved that I agreed, honest even. And just like that, a spark. Not rebellion, not defiance, recognition. Someone else had seen what I wasn't supposed to say out loud. I wasn't invisible. Just drowned out. For now. As I folded my thank you note and tucked it into my purse, I whispered to myself, low enough no one else could hear, "If they silence me at the altar, I'll find another way to be heard." Morning settled into the house like dust on a bookshelf, quiet, untouched, almost too still to be real. Everything in that house had been curated. The polished hardwood floors, the immaculate arrangement of fake lemons in a glass bowl on the kitchen counter, even the napkins on the dining table folded like swans no one would ever touch. It was the kind of stillness that didn't soothe. It suffocated. I stood in the kitchen nursing a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold, half listening to Aunt Beatrice murmur about the florals being delivered late and how the whole town is watching this wedding. I didn't reply. Because she wasn't talking to me. She was talking to the image of the Murtry name she assumed I still belonged to. No one was preparing for a marriage. They were preparing for a performance. I made my way upstairs around mid-morning, needing a break from the rehearsed smiles and passive-aggressive suggestions. As I turned the corner toward my room, I heard it. Crying, not the kind you fake when you want attention. This was raw, ragged, stifled by the back of someone's hand pressed too tightly against their mouth. I paused. My door was cracked just slightly, the way someone leaves it when they're trying to hurry out unnoticed. I should have walked in. I didn't. I stood there, stupidly still, because I recognized the voice. Marlene. I leaned in, careful not to let the floor creak, and caught the reflection in the vanity mirror. She was sitting on the edge of my bed, mascara smudged, holding a torn silk ribbon in her lap like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Jasper's cologne lingered in the room, not the one he wore around me, the other one, stronger, muskier, the kind he'd claimed gave him headaches. I stepped back, gently. No confrontation, no questions, just enough space to pretend it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe it was about something else. It wasn't. But I clung to denial like a life raft. It's easier at first. I told myself I needed air. Outside, the sun was too bright, the kind that makes your eyes ache and your skin itch. I walked to the patio, pretending to check a florist invoice on my phone, pretending not to be unraveling. That's when I saw her, Mom. She stepped out from the back door, blouse slightly untucked, fixing her hair. She looked toward the house like she expected someone to be watching. She saw me. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought she'd say something. But she didn't. Instead, she walked toward me with the same grace she used at galas and luncheons, as if nothing had happened. You need to learn when not to embarrass yourself, she said. Calm, cold, practiced. Then she turned and walked away. That was the moment it hit me. She knew, not just knew, allowed it, or worse, arranged it. Later that day, at dinner, the table buzzed with laughter and wine. My family clinked glasses like nothing was fractured. Jasper was absent. Charlene said he was handling tuxedo issues. Marlene was gone. No one mentioned her. I asked anyway. Where's Marlene? Odella didn't even blink. Don't turn this into a pity party. Marlene's emotions are not your concern. You have a wedding to finish. A wedding to finish. Even when the foundation cracked beneath my feet, I was expected to smile through the collapse like it was choreography. That night, I couldn't sleep. I reread Jasper's old texts, the ones that used to make me feel seen. They felt sterile. Every word was professional, structured, polite, like a resume dressed as romance. Had any of it been real? Dad's words came back to me from an old voicemail. It's not always about what's said, baby. It's about what they don't say. And there, in the middle of a house that claimed to love me, surrounded by people who swore they had my back, I finally asked myself the question I had been too afraid to say out loud. Did I ever actually know this man? But what shattered me wasn't what he did. It was what she didn't. I didn't sleep much the night before. My mind replayed Marlene's sobs, her hunched shoulders on my bed, and Mom's face, blank, clinical, telling me not to embarrass myself. I lay still until the sun slipped through the blinds, too tired to move, but too restless to stay still. Around 8 a.m., I heard Odella knocking on the door like she hadn't just erased a part of me the day before. Family brunch in an hour? Wear something light. Charlene's already downstairs. Her voice had that sugary coating she saved for guests and social functions. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She never waited for a response anyway. I threw on a blouse, ran a brush through my hair, and walked down the stairs to a room that smelled of lemon polish and artificial affection. Brunch was set up like a country club spread, linen napkins, fresh biscuits, trays of fruit no one would touch. Charlene sat at the center of it all, laughing on cue, telling stories that didn't really need to be told. Odella beamed at her like a proud stage mom. I found a seat at the edge of the table, far enough not to be included, close enough to be watched. Aunt Beatrice raised her glass and toasted, "To the Murtry girls, poised, proper, perfect." I raised my glass too, but didn't sip. Halfway through the meal, Cousin Camden, 16, oblivious, looked up and asked, "Didn't you and Jasper used to date or something, Charlene?" You could feel the air tighten. Charlene chuckled too quickly. "Study partners, years ago." She kept her tone breezy, but I noticed her right hand retreat under the table, trembling ever so slightly. I didn't say a word, just watched, like someone witnessing a magician fumble a trick. After brunch, most everyone filtered out toward the back patio. I hung behind, helping clear a few plates out of habit. Charlene left her clutch on the chair. It wasn't locked. I wish I hadn't opened it, but I did. Inside, nestled in a velvet box, was a ring. Not just any ring. The exact same ring Jasper gave me. Same cut, same band, same presentation. That knot in my stomach twisted tight. I held it in my palm and just stared. It was cold. Too perfect. Manufactured, not chosen. People don't duplicate things unless they're trying to bury the original. I set it back, zipped the purse, and went upstairs like nothing had happened. But inside, something shifted. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the ceiling fan. A memory came rushing in, uninvited and crystal clear. College graduation. Everyone was there, except her. I'd waited in my gown at the back of the auditorium, clutching the program with my name under the student speaker list. And then, someone told me the time slot had changed. "Too many donors," they said. I looked out at the seats. My whole family, every one of them, except Odella. Later, she said, I couldn't be in two places at once. She had chosen Charlene's fundraiser instead. That was the day I realized, Mom never missed anything that elevated the family name. She only missed me. And here we were again. The ring wasn't just jewelry. It was a placeholder, a lie dressed up in diamonds, a reminder that I was always second choice, if chosen at all. That evening, after the house had gone quiet, I walked to Charlene's room. She was brushing her hair in front of the mirror. "Did Jasper ever give you a ring?" I asked. Her hand paused mid-stroke. She didn't turn around. "No," she said. Flat. Too flat. I didn't argue. I didn't accuse. Instead, I went to the bathroom, placed my ring next to hers on the counter. Two matching symbols of a story that didn't belong to either of us. A silent accusation. Sometimes you don't need to confront the lie. You just let it sit in the open long enough for it to rot. I looked into the mirror, the light flickering slightly overhead, and whispered, I was always the rehearsal. Later that night, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, notebook in my lap. I rewrote my thank you note. Again. This time, the softness was gone. The line used to say, "For those who stood by me." Now it read, "To those who applauded while I disappeared." I could almost hear my father's voice again, calm, firm. "Family doesn't always protect you, darling. Sometimes they just smile while you drown." I didn't cry, just breathed, long, heavy. The ring fit my finger, but it never belonged to me, and I finally understood why. I got the text late the night before. It didn't say much, just, "Family brunch tomorrow, 10 a.m., dining room." No name, no smiley face, not even a period. It was the kind of message that didn't ask. It warned. Rayanna messaged me right after. "That's not a brunch, that's a setup." I didn't reply. She knew I wouldn't. Odella's voicemail had come in earlier that evening. Same icy tone she reserved for discipline, masked as diplomacy. "It's time we put things in order," she said. I remember standing in the kitchen, staring out the window as the cicadas hummed, thinking, nobody calls a meeting to celebrate peace. They call it to bury dissent. I dressed in silence the next morning. Neutral blouse, slacks, no jewelry, no expression. At 9:55, I walked into the dining room and felt like I was entering a courtroom. The table was already full. Aunt Beatrice, rigid and purse-lipped, Uncle Vernon sipping from a flask disguised as a coffee tumbler, Wade Sr. With his usual crossed arms and judgmental silence, Charlene next to him, looking like she'd been forced to show up but dressed to impress anyway. Two cousins from out of town sat across from her, wide-eyed and too quiet. Jasper wasn't there. Marlene wasn't either. The air was staged, like everyone had practiced lines before I arrived. Aunt Beatrice was the first to speak. Of course she was. "You're lucky to be chosen by a man like Jasper. Don't be foolish." Wade Sr. leaned back in his chair, eyes heavy on me. "We all have our crosses to bear. Marriage teaches you that." Charlene stayed quiet, but she didn't meet my eyes. Not once. I looked around the table, saw the nods, the polite smiles, performative empathy. This wasn't concern. It was strategy. They weren't afraid I'd get hurt. They were afraid I'd make it public. I wasn't the bride anymore. I was the liability. Then Odella finally spoke. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Do it, Ellison," she said, folding her napkin carefully in her lap. "Just marry him. You can leave later if you must, but don't ruin our name now." Her voice was sugar-coated with the venom of consequence. Calm, calculated. Every word felt like a slap, except colder. She didn't stop there. "Jasper's father is closing a deal this month. A partnership that Wade's business benefits from. Your wedding is part of that. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stared at her. So it wasn't about love. It wasn't about me. It was about leverage. I almost laughed. Instead, I said it quietly, just for her. "So I'm your offering on the altar of reputation." She didn't blink. "You're our only card left," she said. Nobody gasped. Nobody shifted, because no one was surprised. No one argued. The room didn't go silent from shock. It went silent from consensus. They had made up their minds before I walked in. A cousin reached over, touched my arm. "Sometimes it's about the bigger picture, Elle." I didn't pull away. I didn't nod either. But something inside me finally snapped. I didn't lose my voice in that room. I gave it away, one nod at a time, one polite smile, one moment of letting things slide. I looked around at the portraits on the wall, at the plates with my grandmother's monogram, the monogram no one let me use at graduation. There wasn't a single chair at that table meant for me. This isn't a family. It's a brand. I stood up, smoothed my blouse. "Excuse me," I said. No one stopped me. I walked upstairs, each step slower than the last, entered my room, closed the door behind me. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that comes when everyone pretends things are fine. I sat on the edge of the bed, removed the engagement ring, didn't throw it, didn't cry, just looked at it resting in my palm like a token I didn't ask for. I placed it on the nightstand, not in the drawer, just there, exposed. "I'll put it back on when I remember why I said yes," I whispered, then leaned back. Maybe weddings aren't always about promises made. Maybe they're about promises broken before anyone has the guts to say them out loud. But the moment I took off that ring, they started planning how to put it back on me. The venue smelled like flowers that had been arranged 3 days too early, faintly wilted, overly perfumed, and desperately trying to hold shape. I arrived ahead of everyone, just as the decorator was fixing the centerpieces. It was rehearsal dinner night, and for some reason, I had convinced myself maybe this one would go by without incident. Foolish optimism, really. A woman with a clipboard flagged me down near the entryway. "You must be Ellis Murdy," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can you sign in here?" "Ellison," I corrected. She looked down. "Oh, must be a typo." I walked past her to the display table where the guest place cards were lined up like tombstones. My name was wrong on all of them. Not just a typo. Every table, every nameplate. I looked up. The welcome banner strung across the back wall read, "Congratulations, Jasper Carver, Charlene Murtry." That one took the air right out of my lungs. It wasn't a mistake. It was a template. And I was never the bride they planned for. Inside, the music was playing too softly for how loud the room was. People were hugging, joking, smiling in bursts that looked like flashbulbs, too timed, too bright. A few guests laughed as I walked in, one of them muttering, "Guess the bride's got cold feet. She hasn't said a word all night." No one came to me with questions, not even congratulations. They went to Odella or to Charlene. I was treated like a prop, an accessory. Even Jasper's groomsmen were holding court near the bar, talking loud enough for everyone to hear. I swear, man, if I had to rehearse one more toast, I'd fake a seizure. Brides just gotta show up looking pretty, right? The rest's for the press. I said nothing. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because if I started, I wouldn't be able to stop. Maya Angelou once said, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." But tonight wasn't the time to tell mine. Not yet. We lined up for the rehearsal walk, pretending this was all sacred. I stood behind the flower girl, Ellie Mae, who turned and looked up at me with a wrinkled nose. "Are you happy?" she asked. The question landed harder than anything I'd heard all week. I bent down a little. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged. "You don't smile like happy people do." I froze. And for the first time in days, I felt something catch in my throat. I pulled her in for a hug. She let me hold on a little longer than a child normally would. Maybe she knew. Or maybe she just saw what adults didn't care to. After the dinner, the mic got passed around. Toasts flowed like boxed wine, sweet, flat, and forgettable. When it came to me, Chance, the sound guy, adjusted the mic stand. I stepped up, note in hand, already knowing I wouldn't need it. The second I opened my mouth, the mic buzzed once, then cut off entirely. He held up both hands. "Tech issue." "Sorry, folks." Odella stood quickly, all charm and convenience. "It's all right." She wasn't going to say much anyway. People chuckled. Polite laughter. Controlled damage. I smiled. I nodded. Then I folded the note, again, and slipped it back into my purse. They'd rehearsed this version of me so well, they no longer believed I existed outside the script. I left without dessert. Back at the house, I found myself in my childhood bedroom, now hollowed out like the shell of something once alive. I sat at the desk, pulled out one of the place cards I'd taken from the dinner. Ellis Murdy. Not even close. I stared at it for a long time. Then, I flipped it over, and in bold, dark ink, I wrote my name, Ellison Cade Murtry. I underlined it twice. That name might not matter to them, but it was mine, and that was enough. Tomorrow, they'd try to erase me again, and this time, I wouldn't let them. He was in the shower when I picked up his phone. I didn't plan to snoop. I just needed the address of the cake vendor he said he saved. I opened the gallery instead. That's where I found it. The video wasn't long, 12 seconds, but it didn't need to be. It was recorded from the backyard security camera. No sound, just visuals. There she was. My mother, in her white cardigan, handing Marlene an envelope. Marlene hesitated, then took it. She wiped a tear, nodded, and walked away. That was it. 12 seconds. And yet I couldn't look away. My mother didn't stumble. She didn't flinch. She looked around once, like she always does when she thinks someone might be watching. Then turned and disappeared back into the house. I sat there frozen, phone in my lap, my hands shaking, but my mind clear. So it wasn't just betrayal. It was transaction. I didn't cry. I didn't confront. I airdropped the file to my own phone and deleted it from his gallery. No confrontation. No guilt. Just strategy. That's when something inside me shifted. Later that evening, I was outside on the porch, staring out into the backyard where the video had been recorded. A breeze cut through the trees, but the air still felt stale. Wade Sr. stepped out. He didn't knock, didn't call my name, just stood there behind me for a moment, then sat in the chair beside mine like it belonged to him. "I hear there's talk," he said. I didn't answer. He lit a cigar, let the smoke linger before he continued. "You walk away from this wedding, don't bother calling me your father again." No hesitation, no preamble. I turned slightly toward him. "Is that supposed to scare me?" He looked at me like I was a child who didn't understand the rules of the game. "I'm the one who helped clean up that Maid situation," he said. He said it like it was nothing, like Marlene's pain was an expense, like Mom paying her off was just a business move. "This family doesn't survive scandal. You understand me?" I stared at him, refusing to look away. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You think this is about you? It never was." And that, of all things, was what hit the hardest. I stood up, not fast, just enough to create space. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I just walked back inside. But the foundation inside me had cracked wide open. Later that night, I locked myself in the bathroom and watched the video again, once, twice, 5 times. It didn't get easier. I thought about posting it, blowing the whole thing up. I typed out 3 different messages to Rihanna, deleted every one. Revenge was tempting. It always is when you're standing in the ruins of something someone else set fire to, but I didn't want to win like them. I wanted out. I backed the file up to the cloud, named the folder Insurance, then copied it to a USB drive and hid it in my makeup bag. Not ammunition, I whispered. Insurance. That's the difference. They react. I plan. The next morning, I found something on my dresser, my ring, the same one I'd taken off, left behind, now back in its box. No note, no explanation. Just the same velvet box, placed perfectly, like it had never moved. I picked it up, turned it in my hand, felt its weight. It didn't feel heavier. It felt hollow. I thought about Ellie Mae's question, "Are you happy?" I set the ring down, not in the box, but on top of it, visible. I wasn't hiding it, but I wasn't wearing it for them either. This time, I would be the one who decided what it meant. When I walked into breakfast, no one looked up. They assumed silence meant surrender. I smiled to myself as I buttered a biscuit. Let them think I'm folding. It'll hurt more when I don't. And the best part of a trap is watching them walk into it thinking it's theirs. I showed up looking like everything was fine. Hair slicked back, dress tailored, heels sharp enough to kill a conversation. That was the trick, looking so composed on the outside, no one dared to ask what was rotting underneath. The venue was dressed to the nines, chandeliers above us, white lilies on every table, gold-rimmed everything. Someone near the entryway whispered, "Now this is a Murtry affair." I smiled, bit the inside of my cheek, walked further in. People were already filling the chairs. Servers glided like they were choreographed. Nothing felt real. It was too polished, too coordinated, like a scene they'd all rehearsed, and I had just walked in late to play a part I never auditioned for. Charlene hugged me, briefly. Her perfume hit before her arms did. "Try to smile more," she whispered through her teeth. "Of course, always smile. Be grateful. Don't ruin the illusion." When they want to shut you up, I thought, they dress you pretty and tell you to smile. I nodded and walked away. It was almost time. Just before the first toast, Rihanna slipped in through the side door, heels in one hand, hair slightly wind-blown. She made a beeline for me. "I have something," she said, pulling me aside behind the curtain near the kitchen. From her purse, she pulled out a small, folded cloth, a handkerchief, hand-stitched, embroidered with 3 simple words. "You are enough." "Marlene asked me to get this to you," Rihanna said. "She's gone." Gone. She didn't explain further. I didn't ask. I held the cloth in both hands. My fingers trembled. The words hit harder than they should have, because it had been years, years since I'd heard the word enough without a condition strapped to the end of it. I folded the handkerchief gently and slid it into my dress pocket, right over my heart. For the first time that night, I didn't feel alone. The clinking of glass signaled the toasts were starting. Someone clapped too loudly. Someone else made a joke about keeping it short. The event coordinator motioned toward me with a practiced smile. "Time for the bride's thank you note." I stood. My hands were steady. I walked up to the microphone and unfolded my speech, the one I'd rewritten over and over. This was the version I wanted them to hear. I looked out over the crowd, familiar faces, strained smiles, waiting for the expected. They didn't know I wasn't going to give them that. I opened my mouth and said, "To the people who taught me what silence costs." The mic cracked, and then it died. A static pop, then nothing. People shifted, whispered, looked around. The DJ at the back raised his hands. "Technical issue," he called out. Odella stood up, smiling too brightly. "It's okay, everyone. She's overwhelmed." The room chuckled, lightly, politely, controlled. I froze. Then, slowly, I folded the speech back into thirds, walked back to the mic stand, placed the paper down, and stepped away. I didn't speak again. I didn't need to, because for the first time, they saw me. Not the version they rehearsed, not the placeholder bride, me. Backstage, Anna caught up with me. "I'm sorry," she said. I shook my head. "Don't be. This was never for them." I kicked off my heels and walked barefoot down the hallway, each step deliberate. The video played in my mind again. Mom slipping that envelope into Marlene's hand, Wade telling me to remember who I belonged to. Let them keep their ceremony. I'd keep my voice. Later, I sat alone in the dressing room, grabbed a scrap piece of paper, and wrote one final version of my thank you note. Just one line this time. "This is the last thing I'll ever do for show." Before leaving, I reached into my bag and slid the folded handkerchief and USB drive inside. One was truth. One was proof. They took the mic, but I still had the message. I walked past Odella and Charlene without a word. Their eyes didn't meet mine. They assumed they'd won. They assumed my silence meant surrender. I smiled, just barely. That's the dangerous part. Tomorrow, they'll expect a bride. What they'll get is a reckoning. The dress felt heavier than it had at the fitting, not physically, but in the way a lie wears on your shoulders when you're expected to wear it like silk. I stood there in the back room of the church, dress zipped, veil draped across a chair like an afterthought, and watched myself in the mirror. Mom walked in uninvited, eyes scanning me like a quality control inspector. "You look presentable," she said. Then silence. She didn't come closer. Didn't ask if I was okay. Just stood there like she was guarding an investment. A moment later, Charlene stepped in, adjusting her lipstick in the mirror beside me. "If you feel nervous, just skip the vows and smile through it. No one will notice." I didn't answer either of them. They left, one after another. Just like that. The final clasp on the back of the dress clicked shut. I stared at the reflection. The lace, the pearls, the borrowed shoes. "This isn't a dress," I whispered to myself. "It's a contract in white." I slid the handkerchief from Anna into my bodice pocket. "You are enough." I repeated it once under my breath, then again, until it didn't feel like a fantasy. Outside the chapel doors, the music had started to swell. People were seated, cell phones turned off, eyes fixed forward. Jasper leaned in beside me. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "I know this isn't what either of us wanted," he whispered, "but I need this merger and you need their approval. Let's just get through it. No apology, no hesitation, just transaction." I stared at him, and for the first time, I didn't flinch. I didn't tighten my jaw or swallow the bile. Instead, I whispered back, "Thank you." He smiled, thinking I meant it. That's when I knew. He thought he'd won, and that's why he'd already lost. The chapel doors opened. Music played, organs swelling with every note. The first row of guests stood, then the second. A wave of polite anticipation rolled forward like dominoes. I took 3 steps into the aisle, then stopped. Still, the music kept playing, a few measures too long before the organist noticed and faltered. The room fell quiet. I didn't look at Jasper. I turned to the guests. Odella's eyes went wide, warning painted in mascara and control. Wade Sr.'s arms folded, his jaw clenched. I lifted my left hand, removed the ring. Slow, deliberate, held it for all to see. Then said, loud enough to carry but not enough to perform, "I'm not walking into a lie." I stepped to the side and placed the ring gently on a floral pedestal at the edge of the aisle, turned, and walked away. One set of footsteps followed. Anna. Her hand rested between my shoulder blades. She didn't say anything, didn't need to. No one else moved, no one knew what to do, because no one had rehearsed for this. Backstage, chaos had already begun. Voices, Calls, footsteps behind me. Odella came around the corner like a storm in heels. "You're embarrassing yourself," she hissed. "Don't make this worse." I turned toward her, calm. "No," I said. "I'm finally making it true. Wade Sr. wasn't far behind." "You'll regret this," he snapped. "You'll lose everything." I didn't raise my voice. If I lost myself to keep it, I never had it. Jasper appeared then, half undone tux, muttering to someone about legal issues and breach of promise. As if I'd voided a business contract, not a marriage. Rayanna gently pulled my arm before I replied. We left through the side door. The church bells kept ringing behind us, not in celebration, just noise. Outside, the air was cooler than expected. I walked barefoot across the grass, reached the floral arch, took off my shoes, set them down, slid the handkerchief from my pocket, pressed it to my lips once, then placed it next to the ring. Didn't look back. I walked in with doubt, I said, barely a whisper. "I'm walking out with peace." A few guests clapped, quiet, steady, not for a wedding, for a decision they never had the nerve to make, but they weren't finished, and neither was I. The light in Rayanna's guest room cut across my face before I opened my eyes. My wedding hair was still pinned in place, barely holding, makeup smudged, lips dry, eyes heavy but dry. I didn't cry. Not after that walk. Not after I left the ring, the dress, and everything they thought made me. My phone sat face down on the nightstand. I flipped it over. 47 missed calls, 14 voicemails, text after text after text. One voicemail from Odella, time-stamped 2:13 a.m. "You broke this family." No other words, no hello, no pause. I took a shower, washed the hairspray out, let the water hit my back until the hot ran cold. By mid-morning, I pulled on jeans, a cotton tee, and tied my hair up in a knot. No makeup, no earrings, just me. I went back to the church. The parking lot was empty. Inside, the floral arch had already been taken down. Chairs stacked, programs discarded. The pedestal still stood in the corner. The ring still there. The handkerchief was gone. What we leave behind says more than what we take. I didn't pick up the ring. I smiled, not because I'd won, but because I was finally whole. I stopped for coffee at the diner on 3rd Street. The usual crowd was there, small-town regulars in worn boots, old couples holding cups instead of hands. I slid into a booth and ordered black coffee. Behind me, I heard them. "It was all for show anyway," someone muttered. "She embarrassed the Murtries," another chimed in. "Shameful." "I heard she caught him with the maid," a third added. They said it like I wasn't real, like I was a tabloid headline. Then a fourth voice, quiet but firm. "Or maybe she saved herself." That was it. I didn't turn around, didn't insert myself. I left a $10 tip on a $5 tab and walked out. Let them write their stories. I was done correcting their versions. At the grocery store later that afternoon, I reached for tomatoes and nearly bumped into an older woman. And her hair was white, her hands weathered, but her eyes saw me. "You probably don't remember me," she said. "I worked for your grandmother, long time ago." I opened my mouth to respond, but she placed a hand gently on my shoulder first. "We clapped," she whispered. "Not for drama, for courage." That moment landed deeper than anything the night before. And later, as I was leaving the checkout, a teenager with chipped black nail polish leaned in and said, "I saw the video. You walked out. I didn't know people could actually do that." I didn't answer, just smiled. It wasn't fame, it wasn't forgiveness, it was resonance, and that was enough. That evening, I drove back to the Murtry house. No one greeted me at the door. I didn't expect them to. I moved room to room packing what was mine. Clothes, books, nothing fancy. Odella wasn't home. Wade Sr. sat on the porch, didn't say a word, just watched, like a guard dog that had already lost the key to the gate. And Charlene wasn't around. But in my suitcase, tucked beneath a folded sweater, was a note. "Maybe you were right. Maybe I was scared." No signature, no apology. I left my room exactly as I found it, except for one thing. On the nightstand sat a framed photo of the family. I removed it, set a blank note card in its place. wrote 6 words. What you built without me stands. Then I zipped my bag, walked down the stairs, didn't say goodbye. Later that night, I was back on Rayanna's porch, feet propped up, a cup of tea in one hand, notebook in the other. The first page was blank, clean, no thank you speech, no performance, just vows, to myself. For all the times I chose silence, I wrote, I now choose voice. My phone buzzed. I didn't check it, I just kept writing. Maybe the ending wasn't for them to accept. Maybe it was just for me to live.